So a really common question that I get is, what is my educational background and what schooling did I have to go through to be able to have this job and work with these kinds of animals? So I'm going to do a bit of a deep dive in this video to try to discuss my background, my schooling, my education, and then what I would recommend after having done what I've done. So first off, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Environmental Studies from Florida International University with a certificate in biodiversity and conservation. And so that is my full academic schooling right there. I only went up to bachelor's degree. I was considering going to master's and PhD, but honestly, for the route that I wanted to do, I didn't see much of a point, and it was so prohibitively expensive. That's going to be a reoccurring theme in this talk about education, unfortunately. But anyway, so I did my bachelor's. Now, what did I learn during that course that prepared me for running an animal sanctuary or working with these animals and caring for them, or even the work that I've done in the wild, doing research, population dynamic surveys, things like that? Honestly, I really didn't learn that much applicable information during my bachelor's that I actually applied to what I do or what I did, and especially to what I do now. Basically nothing. I don't mean that to be necessarily a critique of that education system, but I'm just answering honestly. For running an animal sanctuary, I don't think I did anything, I learned anything during school that prepared me for what I do currently running an animal sanctuary. That's not to say that the schooling is not a fruitful endeavor, though. What I would say very strongly is the benefit of going through schooling like that was it trained me how to think and how to respond to challenges and information. It taught me how to research topics well, how to gather information from varying sources to come to a better conclusion. I think a lot of like how college influenced me as a person was much more in teaching me how to think than giving me information that would be applicable to my current career. And if that makes sense, I'm trying to explain that in the best way I can. Also, it is a warmer day today during the winter, during a colder spell. We just got into December here, so the gators are very not motivated. I do have a piece of chicken that I do want to give to one of them, but I'm holding off until they really lose motivation, and then I'll give it to them. But we can't give them a lot because it is colder and they're not able to digest their food if it gets down too low, which is information that I've learned by researching on my own time, not something that I learned in school. Okay, but anyways, so I definitely do advocate for higher education for people. I think it's really important to go down that path. It really does help formulate a more scientific, intelligent way of thinking, even if you're not learning necessarily the information that would be applicable towards that career. And a lot of times you don't know where you're going to end up anyways. You know, when I was in college, I didn't know if I was going to end up actually having an animal sanctuary, or if I was going to end up doing research full-time, or if I was going to end up being a full-time filmmaker. Those are all different avenues. So when I was younger, I kind of had like, you could call it a tree. And at the base of this tree, I had a passion and a love for animals. And I knew I was going to have a career with animals. But where that tree would branch out, I did not yet know. And so some of the potential paths I had were running the animal sanctuary, or running tours full time, or being a filmmaker. If you didn't know, I used to be really into photography and filming animals in the wild, photographing them in the wild. That was a big possible career path for me. Or going into the research route. I did research for many, many years. And so I didn't know which one was going to become my full-time thing. And those are all still topics I have a lot of interest in, and I still moonlight in those topics and occasionally do them for jobs. You know, so they're not off the table completely yet, but the sanctuary has definitely become my full-time thing right now. So anyways, I guess that will transition us into the next part of what I was going to say in this topic is, people ask, what schooling did you need to do what you do now? What do I do now? That depends on what you're watching on my videos or who you ask. What I do now does involve all those topics I just previously talked about. I have made a career, she's losing interest, I have made a career in many different avenues of working with animals. You know, so what I do now, what I think about what I do now, well, that depends. What do I do now for income? It's not the sanctuary. I make $0 from this, and I lose money for the sanctuary. I don't benefit, I don't profit at all by having an animal sanctuary. I lose my money by having an animal sanctuary. So what do I actually do for a job? Is social media and being a science communicator, an educator, and an entertainer. And so that's really my job right now. My full-time job is social media and trying to make these videos that are both educational, interesting, and entertaining for people to be able to watch. So to be able to do my current actual job, how much of that required schooling? Well, again, I would say college gave me the ability to think in an intelligent way, and that helps me in strategizing my social media networks, and then also learning how to properly communicate things is absolutely a skill that I learned in college. How to properly speak, again, that's something I absolutely learned in college as well. The animal information I did not learn in college though. So you're putting all these things together to try to get to that career. But again, I've done many different jobs to get to this point. You know, I used to run shark diving tours as one of my businesses. I was running tours into the Amazon. I was running tours in the Everglades, all those different things. If you're running tours, it absolutely helps you to have a degree in that field just for the sake of credibility. You know, just for the sake of being able to say, oh, I have this degree and blah, blah, blah. And when people hear that, they're like, oh, okay, I guess I could trust this guy. Whether that's a valid point or not is irrelevant. It is effective. That's what the truth of it. It lends you credibility. Now, I've also worked with a lot of people who have their PhD, who were idiots. I've worked with that a lot. I've dealt with that a lot. That's what, well, that is kind of one of the reasons I didn't want to go down further into that path of doing my master's, doing my PhD, is I was like, I'm going to have to take out so many student loans. This is going to put me hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt. And will it make me more money that I can use to recoup that debt? Answer, no, not in my field at least. So if you have your PhD, I've worked with good people who have their PhD in the wildlife field who are struggling to make ends meet. I've worked with some people who are way smarter than I am. They are much more intellectually accomplished than I am, who have their PhD. They are very much deserving of everything that they could get from that, and they are struggling to make ends meet. And I've worked with a lot of people like that, unfortunately. And I saw that and I'm like, that ain't gonna work. I'm not gonna be able to accomplish my goals on that path. So that's why I ended up choosing more of the path as far as income and making money for social media, entertainment, tours, tourism, that kind of thing. So that's what drove me to go that way instead of doing the research side. I say we're losing interest here. Big Mac. I'm gonna go ahead and give him a piece of chicken. Big Mac, you already had a couple, so don't feel bad for her. Big Mac, you want this? And you see his movements are a lot slower because it is cold. Oh, there you go. Okay, I was gonna say, how did you miss that? There you go, big guy. She's like, what about me? You've had 3. Okay. But anyways, though. So what I was saying is that, again, that idea that, like, well, you need to follow your passion. You need to have a career that makes you happy. I personally think you should have a career that makes you happy. You don't want a career that you hate. Now, it may not be the thing that you want to do the most. Sometimes you have to settle. You have to do something that, like, okay, I can do this. It'll make me a lot of money. I can handle doing this, and then I'll have my passion as a hobby. You know, that's a good idea for a lot of people. But I definitely don't think you should pursue something that you genuinely don't like just because it makes money. You know, you should pursue something, again, you could settle in the middle there. You can be like, well, I'm going to do something that is going to make me money, and I can handle doing it. I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. It'll make a lot of money, and then I can use my passion for my hobby. And that's a great strategy for a lot of people. But for me, I did want to try to make my passion into my actual career, and so that's what I'm doing now. But I'm kind of all over the place here. Whenever I do these long form videos, I always want to make like a board of, like, just, I want to say this, and then I want to say this, and I want to say this, because I tend to kind of go over the place. But anyways, I think that, you know, the great benefit of my education was teaching me how to properly convey this information to people, how to be a science communicator, how to think in the right way, how to speak in the right way, all those sorts of things. But as far as, like, actually the information about the animals, you have to find that out on your own. A lot of what I know about these animals, well, especially the handling stuff. I think when people ask this question, that's really what they mean is, where'd you learn how to handle alligators? Where'd you learn how to learn alligator behavior? There is absolutely no course for that anywhere. That's the kind of stuff you get through experience, and I am self-taught in a lot of that, which I don't advocate for. Being self-taught puts you at great risk of dismemberment if we're talking about predatory animals. So you definitely want to find someone who knows what they're doing, an apprentice under them. I think that's the best path for doing that. I don't advocate going the way that I went on that. Now I came out the other end okay, I survived it, but it's definitely very easy to not survive that, and yeah. You want to apprentice under somebody who knows what they're doing. But as far as like husbandry information, biological information, those are things that you can learn on your own. There's this crazy thing called a book. I know this is a new thing for a lot of young people. I think everything's on the internet. There's a lot of good stuff on the internet. That is very true, and that is where you would probably get most of your information. But a lot of good stuff is also still in paper books. I recommend cracking open some books and trying to learn about them that way. But, again, learning online, really helpful. Now you have AI, now you have ChatGPT. Dude, I have like extensive conversations with ChatGPT where I ask it like, can an alligator do this? Can an alligator do that? And I'm an alligator expert. I still constantly check my information, and I check what I already know to be a fact, and I double check it against ChatGPT, and I ask it, hey, can you look in academic journals? Oh shoot, we're gonna lose her. Bella, I don't have any more chicken though. Bella, no, come here. Oh, we're gonna lose her. We might have to just do the video talking next to them. Don't run from me, Bella. Nope. She's like, you don't have anything. Fine. All right, we'll continue talking, but I guess we're not gonna have Bella hanging out with us right here. But there's a leopard frog. That's cool. Just hopped right there. Boop. There are lots of frogs in here. And the gators will eat the frogs. But anyways, as far as the AI thing goes, I think it's a really cool, really useful tool. But keep in mind, it is often wrong. So like I was saying, I personally... lots of cricket frogs here too. I personally like to double check what I already know, or I'm like 99% sure I know, against ChatGPT and say, can you look this up? And as an expert in this field, I do this, air quotes on expert. I really don't like the term expert because I learn new stuff about these animals all the time. I'm constantly learning new things about them. So although I am an expert, I don't even like to call myself that because I'm always learning new stuff. But anyways, I will double check information against ChatGPT about things that I already 99% sure know myself, and then it'll say something completely, totally wrong. So keep in mind, it does not know everything, and it is certainly not right all the time, especially on niche topics. So a lot of times, I'll double check, and then I'm like, well, I know this much. I know 99% of this to be true, and I'm just looking for that 1% of verification, and then it says something totally out of left field that's completely incorrect. So keep that in mind too. Now, as far as getting into this kind of field, because when people are asking, about my educational background, I think what they're really asking is for like more career advice. What should I do to be able to do what you're doing? So I do recommend getting a degree in the biological sciences, whether or not that's an environmental, biology, wildlife management, whatever you end up doing. That depends more on what exactly you plan on doing for your career, would depend on what exact degree you would recommend. But generally speaking, if you just get your bachelor's in anything in the biological sciences, it should be roughly applicable to wherever you might end up down the line. And so that's generally what I kind of recommend. And this is my general recommendation, very vague. I'm not saying this is exactly what you should do. You have to forge your own path. You're going to figure that out on your own. But generally, I do recommend getting, at minimum, a bachelor's in one of the biological sciences. And then depending on what kind of animal you want to work with or what exact goal you have in mind, like I was just saying, there's branches of the tree there. You have a base of passion about animals. Where do we go from here? You're going to figure that out on your own. You're going to figure out what works best for you and what you can still make a living doing. But going from there, see, I'm looking up at me. Hi, buddy. You're going to want, again, having that degree definitely helps. And then from there, you're going to need to volunteer at a place to be able to gain that experience. So actual in the field experience is one of the most important things that you can have. And so how do you get that? A lot of times you do have to volunteer somewhere to be able to get your foot in the door, because there are a lot of people who tend to want to work with animals, and there are a lot of people who are willing to do it entirely for free. We get a lot of people who are retired and they're like, hey, I want to just come work with them. And I'm like, why would I hire someone who I have to pay when I have other people who just do it for free? You know, so generally to get your foot in the door, you will have to do it for free to learn how to do these things, to learn about the animals, to gain the experience, you know, whatever field you're talking about. So usually that involves volunteering at an animal sanctuary, volunteering in a college lab that works with these animals. That's how I got my foot in the door doing research stuff. I started volunteering first, and then I eventually got hired in a research lab. So again, volunteering is usually the way to get your foot in the door, and it sucks. It sucks to work for free. But unfortunately, that is generally how it goes. You're gonna have to do that, get some experience, and then you can advocate for yourself to be able to actually get paid for that job down the line. You know, now, a lot of people are like, okay, but I don't have anywhere specifically where I love crocodiles and alligators. There is nowhere by me where I can volunteer or gain any experience to work with alligators and crocodiles. Then you might have to move. That's one answer there. You might have to move to a place that does offer that. I grew up in Central Florida, and at the time there were no options for me to do what I wanted to do, so I moved to South Florida. That's why I went down south, to be able to get into more fields that I wanted to do, because it wasn't available where I was. But that was only a several hour difference. If you're in Nebraska and you want to work with alligators, bro, you're in some trouble. Okay, so you might have to move for that. Another answer, though, is to start volunteering at a local animal shelter and get experience with cats and dogs. It sounds very basic, and it might not be what you want to do if you want to work with gators, but getting that foot in the door, if I am trying to hire somebody and I'm like, well, here's somebody that knows literally nothing, and then here's somebody who has experience at least with dogs and cats, I'm going to pick the dogs and cats guy. You know, so it definitely helps you to gain experience volunteering with any sort of animal if you do want to work with other kinds of animals down the line. Now, the warning I would give with that, though, is don't become so entrenched in that you lose sight of what you really want to do, because that also happens too, as people start working in one field and then they get further and further in that, and then they never go to where they really wanted to go, and then 20 years in you're like, oh my god, this is what I'm doing and I never wanted to do this, and in fact I don't even like doing this, and people have like a midlife crisis about that. So don't do that. But it does help you to get experience with any sort of animal, and then try to work towards getting into the real animals that you want to try to work with. Okay, I think that's probably some of the best advice I can give you, is having, you know, pursuing that degree definitely helps, but you don't need it. Again, nothing I'm doing right now required a degree at all. You don't need a degree. I don't want to deter people who are like, I'm never going to get through college. That's not an option for me. I don't want to deter those people, because I was almost that guy. I am just unbelievably bad at math. So for my degree, I had to do, you know, trigonometry and this and that. I'm like, I cannot do this. I cannot do math. I failed trig like 3 different times, and I barely got through that class. My brain doesn't work like that, you know, it just does not compute for math. So for some people, college is not the option. And for those people, I was almost that way. I could do everything else. My other classes, I barely had to show up and I can get A's in. But math, I'd be there every single day and just like smashing my head against a book. It just doesn't go in. So if college is not your jam, you don't need it to work with animals still. It depends on what path, what branch of that tree you really want to go down. You can not have a degree and absolutely have your own animal sanctuary. You can not have a degree and absolutely work at an animal sanctuary. Or you can not have a degree and still do tourism, or be a creator and make your own videos and whatnot. You don't need to do it. Again, I think it's a good idea for credibility, but I don't need a college degree to do any of the stuff you guys see me doing right now. I think it helps, it lends credibility, but I don't need it to be able to do this kind of stuff. So for those who are very, very much opposed to college, and especially the money part, I was trying to circle back to that. Why didn't I get my master's? Why didn't I get my PhD? Wouldn't Dr. Gillette sound a lot better when I run an animal sanctuary? It would. And I talk to a lot of people who are like, dude, you really should go back and get your doctorate so that you can be Dr. Gillette, and that'll really help you out on going on TV shows as an expert. And I'm like, yeah, it absolutely would. It's not worth the debt for me. Now for you, maybe it is, you know, for me, or if you have enough scholarships or you have family money, if it's not a concern for you. For me, yeah, wasn't happening. You know, so for me, that just financially absolutely was not in the cards. So I just did the bachelor's, you know, so don't bog yourself down. Again, you play to your strong suits, do what you're capable of doing. And if you're not able to get through, you know, that layer of education or this layer of education, like, see if you even need it for what you want to do, you know. I think more people do need to go to college. I think, again, that higher learning and education is so incredibly helpful, but at the same time, I definitely didn't need it to do this, you know? Let's see. So the college part, volunteering, super, super, super important. I think that's probably the most important, is volunteering, gaining in the field experience. At least from my standpoint, as a guy who's now running a sanctuary, what's the most important thing for me, if I was looking to hire people or anything like that, how much experience do you actually have in here? How much do I have to babysit you? How much are you starting from square one? I think that's definitely some of the most important stuff. I'll move over this way so we still have them in here. But yeah, some of the most important stuff is just having a layer of experience will really dramatically help you out. And it doesn't even have to be experience with that specific kind of animal. Like, if I was, as somebody who mainly works with alligators and crocodiles, I was like, well, I'm going to hire somebody, and this person has experience at a wolf sanctuary. I already know that person understands dangerous animals and understands how to work with animals and protocol and not to harm animals. And I mean, there's just so much that you can learn from any kind of animal that is applicable to all kinds of animals. You know, so again, that experience I think is incredibly important and might be the most important part of this equation, is gaining that experience of working with some sort of animal, and that'll help you apply to everything else. So education, volunteering, gaining experience, and then actually trying to pursue a career in it. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation, but I think this video has covered most of that. So I think we can wrap this one up. You guys let me know in the comments what you think, what questions you have about any of this, and maybe we can do a part 2 if there's enough questions about it. Thanks for watching.